Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, August 22nd of 2022 public board meeting of the Kingston City Land Bank. This meeting is being held simulcast both via Zoom and in person at 420 Broadway, conference room number 1. My name is Mike Hilliard. I serve as the executive director of the organization. We do ask that members of the public limit their comments to no more than 2 minutes per speaker. And with that, I will turn it over to the board chair, Daniel Cantor.
Hello, Owen, can you hear us? Is the sound okay?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Cool, okay. Hello and welcome. This might be weird because I realized the only people who have attended an in-person land bank meeting are me and Bartek, so welcome everybody. Nice to see your faces. Few announcements, busy month as usual. We had an interesting call with the Omaha Municipal Land Bank. They are very nice people. They're coming to visit for the end of October, so hopefully we can connect with them and hear how other land banks are doing stuff. The compensation committee has been actively meeting to discuss contracts for the next year, so we're very close to kind of moving forward on that, which is mostly on Mike after we deal with your stuff.
Point of order, don't you start with the roll call?
I don't think
Wouldn't be a bad
we do
idea.
anymore.
Yeah.
We can,
I think it's a good idea. No one needs to name their physical address because we're here.
sure. Okay,
Well, I mean, Daniel, you could just say who's here. Or-
should I?
Oh, yeah,
That's,
yeah.
All right, in attendance, Mike Hilliard, Executive Director, Daniel Cantor, Board Chair, Nate Hannigan, Treasurer Bob Dennison, our Vice Chair, Aaron Chilowich, Board Member William Drake Senior, Board Member, and Bartek Stardai, Secretary. And Owen, who is our Construction Project Manager, is remote. And so is Kyle Cohen, who is our Development Project Manager. Don't make me do that. Okay. So this is important. We have accepted a proposal to do DEI training as a board. That's hopefully going to take place in the latter half of September and early October. So a doodle poll was sent around last time we checked, which was an hour ago when I realized I didn't fill it out. Various people have not filled it out. So if you haven't filled it out, go find it. Maybe Mike, can you just float that to the top of the Thank you. Third Avenue potential assemblage continues. Mike might have some exciting updates on that, but appears to be moving forward, which would be a really exciting thing. It would give us a very large lot to potentially build a multitude of homes on. In other news, we've been working with Katie Dwyer Designs out of Kingston for the last couple months on a rebranding effort. So the design committee will show you our new proposed logo tonight. And she's mocked up sort of some ways that have been integrated with the website and other kind of assets that we have. The pipeline discussion with the city of Kingston also ongoing. It was brought to the proposal or slightly revised version of what we had kind of all agreed to after many months of discussion was brought to the finance committee a couple weeks ago. I was not able to attend, but Mike and Nate were there. I understand there was some active conversation after which the committee, who in fairness only had a few hours to review it, decided to punt it to next month. So I guess what that means is that it's not, I guess it'll ideally pass finance, then go to laws and rules, then go to the full council. So next month, September, it'll go back to finance, hopefully there it will pass. then laws and rules, and I think that puts it on the common council agenda,
10-4.
October 4th, I said. Cool, so I'm going, call your representatives perhaps. Encourage them to do the right thing. I will try not to step on Owen's toes, but Greenkill has a certificate of occupancy, super exciting. Speaking of Greenkill, we have 2 eligible candidates to purchase the home. After doing this a couple different ways, we're doing a lottery this time, feels clean and fair, and so we will reveal that next, I guess, is our
That's one that.
agenda. What?
He's a nice one.
Oh, yeah, this is the hat where we hold you. This will be fun and weird. And I think lastly, we did have a resignation this month. Minya DeJeanette decided to leave the board, so that does create another vacancy. So currently we have 3 available board seats. As my understanding is we have, I believe, 9 eligible candidates, some of which have come through the city, some of which have come through our portal online, so we gotta work that out with the city because it's a little weird. But anyway, we'll be reviewing those, and we wish Minya the very best and thank her for her contributions in the past 7 months, 8 months that she was with us. So that's that. Did I miss anything important? Okay. So now I guess we do a public lottery. It's not every day we get to sell a house, so let's do it. So Mike, so we have a sorting hat. Mike has the reference number, like the case numbers
Correct.
for both
Correct.
eligible candidates printed out in here, this is okay, so I am removing them from here. Just on the
I
line.
think you should show, you have to show.
Oh my gosh, okay.
They say camera, all that stuff, right?
1, 2. Does somebody wanna shake it up? I'll shake it up. Should I stand? This is so serious. Okay.
Here, is it wood?
Someone just asked in the chat. Why don't we pause? Someone just asked in the chat, why are you picking from a hat?
Well, rather than maybe go back and forth with public comments, I think it would be better if we could, maybe I could give an overview of the guidance that we've been given on this.
Yeah.
So we opened up on May 14th, the opportunity for people to go through our intake form process on our public website. We conducted a pretty extensive outreach campaign involving various electronic outreach, a fair amount of in-person, handing out printed flyers. We talked about it at our board meetings. We did various forms of outreach to our community and beyond. This public application to purchase 149 Greenkill. That process did close on June 14th. And so now we've begun working, at that point, we've begun working with a homeownership counselor, which is based in Newburgh. That firm is qualified to move potential applicants through the process of completing an application, making sure that they're qualified to receive mortgage financing to purchase the home. Everything that goes into all the nuts and bolts of what specialists are able to do and have been doing, and we are just serving in the capacity of building these wonderful homes. And so that process reached a conclusion when we received from the homeownership counselor the numbers for 2 households that would meet all the requirements to purchase the home. Unfortunately or fortunately, there were only 2 out of all those who submitted an intake form and completed an application package. Those 2 numbers have been written on pieces of paper. We've been advised to, in conducting a lottery, which was the advice that we received, to conduct it as Daniel was about to conduct it, which is in public manner, transparently, as such.
Correct. I think it's also fair to say due to fair housing laws, this is by far sort of the cleanest and most objective way to handle this. We don't want to get in a situation where we're basing our decisions about people's home ownership on feelings and vibes, so that's whoever asked. Hopefully that's satisfactory, okay. And then I guess the way this works, so whoever is not selected will essentially be a backup, so anything can happen in the process of buying a home, so if the selected candidate doesn't get to the closing table, there's still an opportunity for the other eligible candidate. And with that. What is?
So, no, I was gonna say something. I was gonna say something. Can I say something?
Yes,
So, the other people that didn't get chosen, do they go back in the lottery or?
well, so there's only two that have like been deemed eligible for this house. I think like the next house that we sell, those people, they get like follow-up or like they're still on the list.
Yeah, that's.
We're still, people have put in so much time and effort in, getting to this point, and just because they weren't successful in getting
This,
into this part of it, they're still on the wait list for the next round that we
Yeah.
contacted as
that's,
soon as the next property becomes available.
yeah,
But the person who's not selected tonight will be placed on the wait list for this home, so that if something happens and the person who is selected cannot purchase or chooses not to purchase, there's a second person, a second person.
okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Okay. People is through the number.
He's not going to the Vegas, is he?
Huh?
Ever go into Vegas, he used to pull the lottery?
Okay, the first selected candidate is case number 513-6952. Again, that is 513-6952. And then the second is that here. Congratulations indeed. And then the second is 513-8495. I will repeat again. Second backup candidate is 513-8495. So I think it's possible there's somebody on this call who's very excited and somebody else who's probably a little disappointed. We are happy for the first person and apologize to the next person, but seeing as you've made it to this point, we will have more homes in the future and wish you all the best.
Well,
Did we do it? Did we do it? Okay.
Done.
And the hat is empty, there was no. Okay, we did our first lottery. Wow, cool. Okay, so we now have a public comments period. The only members of the public are over on Zoom. We ask that you limit it to 2 minutes per speaker if possible. And Mike will cut you off if you're inappropriate. The floor is open.
Maybe just from looking at the Zoom screen, Dorothy Santiago, you're the first person we see.
Hi, hello. Well, thank you so much for all you do. I'm here because I did apply for the lottery. So I'm here with my family. I actually don't know where to find the our case number, so.
So the person who is the household that was just selected, I will correlate the case number with the individual and contact them. I don't know either at this moment.
Okay.
That information, I'm sorry if that keeps you in more suspense. We were hoping to respect the privacy of whoever was selected, and I'm sorry that adds more anxiety to you, but.
No apology necessary. Thank you. So we'll, hope springs eternal, and thank you so much for all that you do and, giving our family and other families in the area a chance at home ownership. it means a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Is there any way you can figure it out like now?
I can, but I think for privacy
Right, yeah,
purposes, we might not.
Well, not to announce, but just to shoot me. Okay,
Certainly.
I'm sorry.
Okay. iPhone 13, you identify yourself? iPhone 13. I think I know who
Hey,
I,
Mike. This is Kyle. This is Kyle. I had to call in. I'm not sure if I'm iPhone 13 or not, but I'm one of the iPhones.
okay, hi Kyle, thank you.
Hi.
Kyle, I'm sorry, I'm confused. There's also 210 phone, 201? That's Kyle as well.
I'm 201. I am 201. I'm not. I might not be iPhone 13.
I think you're not iPhone 13. Okay, would iPhone 13 mind identifying themselves? My name is Catherine. Hi,
Hi,
Catherine.
Catherine. Hello and welcome.
Would you like to speak at our public meeting or, and would you mind also giving your last name? We kind of ask for that from everyone.
Usually included in the minutes.
Thank you, Catherine. Would you like to speak? It's okay if you don't. Just want to offer you that opportunity. I think that's enough. Okay.
Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Mike,
Okay. Executive Director's Report. Good evening, everyone. I will try to keep my report somewhat brief. And I appreciate you going through this with me as I look up to the camera and look down to my notes. As Daniel mentioned, the pipeline process for the city will hopefully go through, as he mentioned, and come to a vote on the 4th of the 10th month of this year. Look forward to that. In our pre-development category, there remain 8 properties under pre-development, 4 of those being our Legacy Cities homes, which are 29 Rogers, 63 German, 237 East Union, and 169 Hurley. Wanted to give a shout out to Kyle for slogging through, as is Owen, as is Erica, all of us working very diligently to get this to the point with the state and with the construction lender so that we can have a closing. We believe a closing date has probably been set for the end of September. It has moved a few different times, as you know, since March when we started this, but we believe this one is real and things are falling into place. I would like to ask Kyle if he wouldn't mind giving more detail on this, if there are any high points to highlight, but I would like to say that this is a major opportunity to promote our work. This is the largest thing that the organization has done, intersecting with the state's housing arm and private lenders. We will also probably be the first organization to close in the state of New York under this program. So there are many opportunities for interconnectedness around the initiatives under the state for this program and us being the first or among the first to close. So more on that possibly at comms. The other properties in the pipeline, Gill Downs, Henry, and 3rd Street. I think I did email around to most folks, but the city was kind enough to allow us to be included in their application for what are called restore funding from the state, $150,000 for Gill Street. And Gill Street, you may recall, was the one that was too expensive for us to move forward with previously, so that may help. I don't know the timelines exactly when we would find out if that funding was available. 69 Gill. Yeah, we looked at that for Legacy Cities originally, and then it just became too expensive for the whole thing to work. So we pulled it out and maybe found a way to bring that back in for another round of Legacy Cities. Hopefully. So that's the update on Gill.
Just about the, that's foundation issues.
Yeah, that's the White House,
Yeah.
right?
It's
It's on the
blue.
left side.
On the left, it's got like an enclosed front porch.
No, okay, all right, yeah.
It's a real cute little house.
Yeah.
Got some front
Yeah.
porch.
Broke down there, no? That's what
I was going to say, you could see it in your
Yeah.
mind's eye where it was. So we'll see more on that as it evolves. And I don't know if we'll have major updates every month, but we're trying to secure more funding to make that possible. Henry Street, I believe there'll be a discussion about that at ADC, so I won't step in the way of that. 3rd Avenue development being 151 3rd Avenue. I unfortunately do not have any further updates than I've given for several months about trying to negotiate with the owner of the judgment so that we can have that property donated to the land bank. 2 homes under construction, excuse me, part 2 is 1 home under construction. That's 124 Franklin. Don't want to steal any thunder from anyone, Owen. So I will just say on time and on budget, thank you very much. Sales updates. I think we all in the room know what just happened with Greenkill. So purchase and sales agreements will be transmitted following this meeting, and those will be sent to the selected household this week. So that's what's taking place on that. And then similarly on, well, also under the sales updates on 24 Hamilton, there's some updates at ADC about that process. New funding updates, no updates on the ARPA stimulus funding, other than to say, I believe the city may have selected someone to oversee that grant, but I'm not sure on that. So I'll have more updates for that as they evolve. And then also, as soon as the budget, our annual budget is passed, we will be able to apply to the state of New York under the Land Bank Initiative, which allows for up to, and we qualify for the highest amount of $200,000 per year over 3 years in operating expense from the state to help fund our organization. So that will take place in earnest as soon as the budget is passed by the board. In the other category, just wanted to give a big shout out to Erica for so many things, including budget and audit and ABO and insurance. So thank you, Erica. More updates at the committee level from her, I know, but just wanted to do that. And then last thing I want to say is just please do the doodle poll for the DRI. If you haven't, it should chase you around a little bit if you haven't filled it out. But this is just trying to set everyone's schedule because it's been difficult to find 4 evenings on hopefully 2 consecutive weeks within the next 2 months. And so the doodle poll is a way to try to organize that. Those are my updates.
Great job.
I would like to say one thing at the end because I asked Kyle if he would update on Legacy Cities and then I walked right past it. Kyle, is there anything you'd like to mention on Legacy Cities?
Oh, no, I think what you mentioned was, yeah, it's super exciting. Hopefully we're the first organization to get this done. And I think one of the advantages about being the first is that hopefully we can set some precedent to do this again and get another Legacy Cities round going and deliver some more houses. So yeah, I think I'm very excited to get this closed and hopefully get another round in the near future.
Thank you. That's it.
Great job, guys. All right. We move to committee reports. So Owen, do you want to kick us off on construction and then Bob take over?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Can you hear me all right?
Good.
Okay, great. So as Mike and Daniel mentioned, Greenkill is completed, punch list is done, and we have our permits closed out. So that's our 4th C of O, and it's pretty much cleaned out. I've got a task, design committee has a task, but that should be completed this week, and we're going to be done there. So that's awesome. At 124 Franklin Street, progress is good on that house. When that GC is going, they really move quickly and get a lot done. This particular week, we're at a little bit of a slow moment as not to blame it entirely on this issue, but it does have something to do with this issue that we're having some struggles with the designed heating system and sourcing the units. I bring it up in particular because it's something it's basically the same kind of system we did at Greenkill, and it's the same kind of system we have specified for our Legacy City homes, and it's pretty much across the board, like industry-wide shortage of this type of units. So anyway, we're figuring it out and working with the architects to come up with alternatives, but it's been interesting to see that it's not like, usually it's like one brand has shortage and somebody else has a backup option. And this has been kind of like the top three options don't have anything, and it's really scraping the bottom of the barrel for options. So this is partially relevant because we want Franklin Street is getting the sidewalks redone right now, and if there's any remote possibility that we have to fall back on a natural gas plan, we want to get that figured out and taken care of before city spends much money making the sidewalks in the street great. So right now they're working on the other side of the street, so we got a couple more days to figure that out. That house, there has been some unanticipated structural issues, but comparatively relatively minor things that are being solved with wood and not with metal and concrete. So overall, that house, I would say we're still like lagging with incorporating any kind of issues discovered in the first start of construction there, but that's kind of, I'd say by the next board meeting, that'll be more clear, and it all seems like it's falling into place kind of in the zone of what was anticipated for that project, but budget wise. Owner supply materials are coming in, lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures, cabinets are almost here. Front door transoms almost here, and that's it on Franklin. Legacy Cities, we are working to get contract finalized, and Dan and I are meeting with the architect next week to talk about any hanging issues that will be incorporated along with the design committee selections in with our final building set. And then we'll be doing a revision on the building set and ready for construction. Any questions from the board on construction matters? All right. Thanks a lot.
I would just note on Franklin, though, we've had a week or two of slow activity. In about a month, they framed, they did, which was a lot of framing, they replaced the roof, we have new electric, plumbing is basically run, aside from the HVAC. Owen very smartly coordinated the windows to be here before construction even started. Those are now in. They've primed the exterior of the house. It's already looking like real house. So though the last couple weeks have been slow, they are moving really quick, and a lot of go into keeping things on track.
Absolutely, and overall, they're still kind of committed to this same, what is a fairly aggressive construction schedule. So they're still trying to wrap up by the end of the year.
So just if I can, so we have a second contractor that we like a lot. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience, but the work so far is good. It all comes out in the finished work. So we'll see.
Okay.
They talk a big talk.
Okay, so far we don't dislike it.
Correct. Okay, Bob, we have some agenda.
Okay, we had the acquisition, disposition, and construction committee. We had, we want votes on a couple things, so we'll talk about them quickly. What we'd like to, we're recommending to the board that we authorize a request for proposals for real estate broker services to sell 111 Downs, which is a Pathway 2 project. We're going to be selling it as is, and we think having a realtor handle it for us will make our lives easier and help us get as much as we can for that building. If you remember, that's an old Victorian. It's, you know, it was a great house once, not so much now. It's not really going to be a house that can be a multifamily affordable or affordable because of its configuration. It just doesn't have. It's just too big, too costly, one bathroom. So we could never pull it off.
Sorry, which property is this?
111 Downs. So what we'd like to do is to put a request for proposal out for a real estate broker to handle it for us and move forward and sell it.
clarifying question. Would whoever we hire, would they be able to handle subsequent sales of other stuff? I don't think
Why
so.
not? Yeah.
Okay, so we're really kind of putting out an RFP for general brokerage services.
Are we putting it for general or are we putting it just for this house?
I thought we were talking about a general,
Okay.
inclusive of whatever dispositions we seek to go down that route.
I'm good either way.
I think we should, just so we don't have to do it every time. We could end up selling Gil, we could end up selling Henry.
Yep.
Murray, Fairview,
You broker for-
I'll never stop.
And it could be re-examined every property too, if we're working with a broker and
Right.
decide to.
Right,
We'll get a list of all our brokers, now one broker we have to go with.
right, and the big advantage is it'll allow us to get properties onto MLS, which currently we haven't done, so just reaching a much broader pool of potential buyers. Pretty much right now, we've been limited to our banners, our newsletter, and we've put listings on Zillow. But Zillow has been really hard because we're selling stuff so far below market that Zillow is like, this can't be real. They won't list it.
They won't let us do it with some properties. They don't believe it.
And this is for our Pathway 2 projects, not for those that we renovate.
Well,
Or is it?
that, I think that is up in the air a little bit. I talked to somebody who, at Repco, they did a big project at the Sullivan County Land Bank. It was a super similar kind of program, but totally different process. So they did have everything listed with a broker on all the platforms, and then basically people applied to, well, so they submitted an offer to the broker, and the broker sort of directed them to fill out the land bank application. And then the board followed a more subjective process than we feel comfortable with, but. So I think it's something to talk about. It obviously it makes it more difficult to be targeted.
Yeah, right. What does that do to our
However-
targeted, to our affordability target
Right.
for Kingston, for,
I think there's arguments both ways. I think it makes a lot of sense for asset stuff.
right, yeah, for
Right.
Pathway 2, it makes sense. But for the ones that were, I would want to really think about it for the ones that we want to have a target.
I think it's a further discussion. I know we brought this up with Brian a long time ago, and he felt that it could not or should not be done.
I think the conversation you had there with Repco is illuminating. that
Yeah.
Someone is doing something that we should learn more about.
Yeah, so that's on my list. I'm trying to set a meeting with that person, and I think if it were me, Mike, Brian, and I guess whoever else is interested, maybe just to hear what they did exactly and how they felt it worked legally.
So ultimately, the proposals we'd be reviewing would be like what kind of commission they'd be taking off of the sale?
Right, so, they may decide they would do something less than 6%, but either way, like if their compensation at the end of the day goes above 10,000, we would have been required to get an RFP. If it goes above 5,000, we would have been required to do 3 bids. So it's possible that it would be below that depending on what the house sells for, but if it's over 5, we have our bases covered.
Makes sense.
So this is what the city did when Morrison was awarded the contract to sell city-owned properties years ago, so. If it was good enough for the city of Kingston, sure.
So
Can
what,
I say something?
Yes.
So weird, like have you guys there and I'm on Zoom, but I think the best part about creating this opportunity is it allows a third party that has more of a baseline to work with the community to do the vetting, which our bandwidth and our capacity doesn't allow that all the time. And then just making sure that there's an established structure it creates more transparency for the property, the process. And also creates more of an opportunity for awareness of the property that's available.
Well, I assume we'll put an MWB element in the RFP. Not that that would be the determinant, but it should be a factor.
I think that would need to be articulated
Sorry.
specifically.
MWB, and minority or women's owned business enterprise
Yeah.
element. And I'm not saying it's necessarily determinant, but I'd like to know.
Yeah. Sorry, I just didn't know what that acronym was.
Right. Sorry.
I think we should articulate that very clearly if we're going to do it and what that means and what that looks like. This board, this organization has never set maybe goals or
I'm not
targets.
saying set a goal.
And so it just hasn't been, no, I'm just saying, like, what do we want to do? What does everybody want to do? We should do what we want to do. We should do it, but we should write it out.
Yeah, setting a goal is way more work than.
Okay.
So right now is the goal to basically vote on the creation of the RFP
The authorization of Mike and company to.
I think it may-
and issue it.
Circulation prior, something for comments?
Or we, okay, yeah, I think as long as there's an opportunity for the board to review
Okay.
the actual language in it, but
Okay.
I think it makes sense to authorize the creation and dissemination to the board.
Got it.
Yes,
Yeah, and, you're saying, so wait until next month to issue?
I think we wouldn't have to wait until next month to issue if you've already kind of drafted.
It's not done, so I don't know what I
Yes,
can
it is.
send it.
Okay.
But I could certainly send it around for comments with the understanding that the board, if there are reasons that the board feels not to issue it, we would not issue it.
Right,
So yeah,
but if we can come to consensus over email, this is fine, send it out.
so we give you authorization to issue it, and if for some reason we don't have consensus over email, and after you read it, we'll table it till next month. If not, come to consensus, then we'll issue it with the guidance we gave you.
Final decision to issue it pending approval.
Perfect.
Something like that.
Gotcha.
Should I move?
You can move, yes.
I have to move.
So what are you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna move to authorize Mike Hilliard, Executive Director Extraordinaire, to craft an RFP and issue it pending board member consensus after the specific language is circulated. Sure. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Our second exciting item, the discussion and vote on an RFP for 110 Henry. We've heard that there is a desire for someone to use that building for a community benefit that the community has embraced. But before we sell the building, we really should do a request for proposal based on accepting proposals that have community benefit. Well, if you remember, we issued a request for proposals in the past for this. We had 4 proposals. We did not accept any of the proposals, primarily because they didn't really have the financial strength or number that we wanted that would make us comfortable in reconstructing the house. So we rejected them all. We did provide debriefs for those that wanted it, so they understood what the shortfall was. That aside, to issue an RFP now that has a public benefit, the public benefit that's been discussed that we've heard about is a daycare center, which apparently is a great need in the community at that location. And we do know that there's someone who's interested in pursuing that, but to make sure that it's above board and anybody has an opportunity, we talked about issuing a request for proposals that would have an element in there for community benefit, specifically a daycare center, child care center. We've talked about it with Brian. He was a little uncomfortable about the specifics of the public benefit. But the more more thought about it. I don't know if that's the discussion issue. Are we concerned about issuing an RFP requesting proposals for someone to convert that building into a daycare center or a childcare center? I don't know how to describe it.
So the question is whether the proposal should be generally for public benefit or whether it should specify a daycare center.
I think that would be the whole question.
I-
And I get nervous about a public benefit because one of the ones we rejected was an extension of the museum across the street that's been under construction for
The train
like 20 years.
So the 110 is a two-family house.
Yeah, right across the street.
Huge duplex.
And somebody did talk about doing it as a daycare center on one half and the other half somebody living in, which you know.
So I guess the other, and maybe the consensus has moved past this by now, but I think another valid perspective here is we have already RFP'd this building. The kind of hope for a public benefit, I think, is inherent in both our mission and our disposition policy. Our disposition policy and legally allows us to facilitate a private sale. In my view, an additional round of RFP is not necessary. I think it delays the process further on a building that has sat vacant for over a decade now.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I think it's the advice of our council to do an RFP. Not required.
I would describe our council, well, go ahead.
I was just going to try to recollect the conversation with him. I think the specific reason was that we had issued an RFP with no specific desire for the use. So people responded without believing that something that they would submit would be viewed preferentially over another use. If we're changing that and not going down another public RFP, if we're changing our desire and not doing a public RFP, there
We
was
haven't changed our desire. I mean, had this person proposed the first time around, we would have selected them more than likely. Not necessarily simply because of the end use of the building, but because they can afford it, they have the development experience to do it, et cetera, et cetera. We did have proposals that at least claimed that they would create affordable housing with the building. We didn't find them eligible, but you know, I think that is absolutely a public benefit. So, and I don't think that we should issue an RFP that just says we want a daycare center, because
Having
it's a
done,
house.
having done the debrief, you know, we had one person that wanted to cut it up into like 8 units and flip it. Maybe 6 units. We had one person that wanted to live in it, 4 units? Okay, we had one person that wanted to live in it, and do the other side. The 4-unit one didn't meet zoning, so it didn't, I mean, it wasn't constructible, and the money was, another person was looking to live in one side and construct the other side as a rental. It's a good idea, but I didn't have the depth, didn't have the money, didn't have the depth to do it. Good guy, would have been a great idea, but we had another proposer who wanted to rehabilitate and flip it, who has been successful in doing others and was looking at an affordable housing element. I like that one a lot. But again, money didn't work for them. And then we had the Transart across the way, which we didn't offer any money. They just said, give it to us, you know, because. So, you know, I don't know why I went into that. Well, part of it is, you know, the question with Brian was risk of the appearance of impropriety by a private sale. And he's fearful that, so he believes that an RFP would mitigate that risk. So the question is, do we want to take on the risk of the appearance of impropriety with a private sale?
It would essentially be, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, I just had a clarification question. So obviously I get that Brian is saying he believes that we'd mitigate risk by doing an RFP versus not doing one.
That's correct.
Did he specify whether he felt there was any sort of mitigation of risk doing an RFP specific for a daycare versus doing one that's generally for a public benefit?
He wasn't enthusiastic about doing with the specific. I remember, is that correct?
My recollection was that he said that giving a preference for certain types of uses might be okay to do, but narrowly limiting it only to certain uses, he didn't think that that was the way to go.
Effective.
So making daycare completely instead of somebody living on the other side.
We do a preference for it, and the argument is we do a preference for it, and then maybe someone comes up with a better, even better idea, and that's you do better.
It's, yeah.
But unlike the last or two, we got the price. We did not do that. We had a minimum, suggested minimum price, which was significantly less than the price that we would sell. Now, the reason I say that is because we've had realtors look at it and give us some advice. So I think our price would be higher than what we had asked for.
Right.
I mean, if it's been sitting vacant for a decade, like what's another couple of months to do an RFP, right?
No, I think it's less to do, my hesitancy, my personal hesitancy, has less to do with with the fact that it will sit vacant for a few months while the RFP terminates. And more the fact that like we have a proposal that is. We have a proposal that we think meets a lot of the criteria, and we're essentially going to create this other process. And people might try to jump through that loop, but then if we're going to do that, I would say we need to be open to, if we're going to do the RFP, I think we should be open to the other proposals we receive.
Right.
I have to open the proposals we receive and not just the proposal to make the daycare that's already expressed interest in making a daycare. We have to kind of view them all because we're doing the RFP. And so it just.
Right.
Yeah, it's an odd situation because we know about this existing thing and we understand kind of that it has support basically from people, from a lot of people, yeah.
I also feel like the only compelling reason to me to do an RFP is if we also pretty radically change our marketing process, like in other words, getting it on MLS with this new broker, because I just feel like if we RFP and, taking up the banner a little because it's exact, we're just doing the exact same exercise we did a year ago. And if we feel confident that we're not renovating the building, I don't like hoarding buildings.
I would suggest that you entertain a motion for us to issue an RFP for 110 Henry Street with a specific use in mind. And then we can discuss it. And then we can vote. And it might or may not, it might pass, it might not pass.
Entertain them both. So, sorry, the motion is the first motion to issue an RFP, period.
First motion is to issue an RFP for 110. Here's a motion I propose. Then we issue an RFP for a specific use for 110 Henry.
It's your committee report, can't you make the motion?
I'm making that motion.
Well, do we do discussion first, or do we?
Second, and then discuss. Hello, wait.
It's gonna take me 5 years.
The first vote is having an RFP versus not having an RFP.
Right.
To be discussed on what that RFP looks like is the next vote, is what Bob's saying.
I don't think that is what I'm saying.
Well, I'm saying if we make this motion and second it, we can discuss it.
Well, you've made the
I
motion.
made the motion.
Second.
Okay.
Okay,
So
now,
now we discuss.
now we're allowed to discuss, okay.
So your position, and I share that to some extent, and even though despite the phone call with Brian, that if we that we need not issue an RFP, we can just sell it. There's a risk.
I mean, I think we run the risk no matter what. You cannot please everyone. This is in part the authority of the public authority. We are empowered to make these decisions.
a matter of, yeah, I guess it's a matter of taking a council's advice and limiting our liability.
Well,
I would agree with Brian on this, that I think we should issue an RFP to reduce our risk. I also think by going through the RFP process, it will require that organization that's proposed this idea to think it through a little bit more.
right,
And
I think
And I
that's
think
super.
bring the entire board onto that, whatever they're coming up with. So I would agree with Brian that we should follow.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea.
I do, yeah, I mean, I do think it's super important that prior to any sale, like, we have a clear set of deliverables from the buyer and, you know, real detail on their proposal beyond what they've already offered. I guess my other concern is like, okay, because in part, this is a discussion of how it will look, right? So I feel like on the flip side, we may get someone who's super qualified to renovate the building, wants to make it affordable housing, but offers us $10,000 for it. There are those in the community, I think, that would say we have a brand new commercial thing right across the street, which was originally a house. Now this enormous house is gonna be another commercial entity on what has historically been a struggling residential street.
Well, we've already entertained and rejected.
Right, all the things.
Well, I'm
you're
saying there could be another proposal
Which
from
we
a
could,
different person.
how do you defend accepting a subsequent proposal that's the same as the ones that you just rejected?
Because this imaginary subsequent proposal might have the financial backing and experience to do it.
But then we should entertain that, right? I guess it's
I think we
policy,
should, but I guess the point being, if we're really hoping for, you know, call it a few $100,000 in revenue from this building and somebody offers 10K or whatever, and then we're making a decision and we go with the two.
Well, see, I would envision that their RFP says a minimum price of $275. And for one thing, and specific use of the daycare center.
I think specific use makes zero sense. There's going to be exactly one candidate who wants to offer $275,000 and open a daycare. So what is the point of this charade?
To protect ourselves. That would be.
From what?
Protect yourself.
I think it's.
I mean, if we truly are doing this to insulate the organization from liability, which I think is the right call and was our advice from council, then it should be broader than simply the daycare facility. Now, that's not to say that like in reviewing these, we have that in mind, but what if somebody else comes in with their own proposal for a different daycare facility and they have better financing?
Elder care.
Yeah, what if they come in with a different community purpose and they have better financing and a better idea? We don't know. And to truly protect the organization, there should be an RFP for a community benefit. And everything that you're saying would go into our discussion of reviewing those proposals that come in. Right?
I'm not immovable on this. I just have concerns.
I think Wagner's proposal kind of convinced me, but it's idea, it was just his thought, convinced me the other way. Should we vote?
So if your discussions are really gonna vote.
So,
We can go on.
I guess all in favor of issuing a second RFP for the sale of 108, 110 Henry.
With a minimum price?
Sure, with a minimum price.
Okay.
And
And the public use.
A public,
a
well,
community benefit.
A community benefit.
a community benefit,
Okay, and the price would,
but
Yeah.
a open-ended community benefit.
well, yeah, that's fine.
And we would vote like next time in theory on the actual issuing of the actual RFP, no? Or
We
same
could-
thing, like,
Do it the same way as the brokerage.
okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, same way as I'm over here. Great. Okay, so that.
Okay, so now we have calling for a vote, issuing an RFP for the as-is sale of 108 110 Henry with a minimum bid price and a specified
Community benefit.
broad-ranging community benefit contained within the RFP.
I'll second that, right? That's, and then that's what we vote on.
All in favor?
Alright.
Motion passes. I'll abstain, just because I can.
All right, now the next one is easy. The next one is easy. We had at our meeting Scott Nealon, who is the buyer, potential buyer of our property on Hamilton Street. He's been marching on. We've given him license agreements so that he can do the work necessary to advance the project. He has done much work. It's taken longer than he expected to get contractors and other prices, which is not surprising given today's market. He appeared before the board, talked about what he has, or before the committee, talked about what he has done. I think he's doing a fine job of doing the right stuff, and he has asked us for an extension of his license or a new license agreement. So it's really not a renewal because it'll expire for 120 days. So he can finish the work necessary, get his contractor on board, and get his construction loan applied for us. So that's the short story. So the committee's recommendation, and I'll make a motion that we grant Scott Nealon a 120-day license agreement to continue the work necessary to close the sale on that property for us. How's that?
I'll second that motion. Is there any discussion? Look at me. I'll forget by next time.
Seems like it's moving through, I'll just say, the committee seems like it's moving through all the steps very well.
He's doing, yeah, I think his main issue right now is just securing a contractor. Which,
He's got plans, he has architect, he's
Which house is this?
It's
21.
way over by the shipyard on Hamilton, which is a weird little street. I didn't know.
That end off of a wheel.
Shipyard.
Well, you can see the shipyard from there. So you get on a Beale,
Yeah,
it's a right-hand turn off of Beale,
okay.
up on the hill.
Oh, it goes up in the back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And the house was a
Yeah,
weird
really
little
old
house.
back.
Yeah, had no bathroom. It was kind of an interesting house.
Lands are a little different.
Little bit
A little different.
yes.
A toilet, no shower.
I didn't even, I mean, when I was there, certainly there was no shower. There might have been a toilet once upon a time.
There was a toilet right at the top of the
It was-
stairs
But the rest of it was kind of,
in a closet that they had like made the door, like they cut the door in half, I think, and put it in just so it's sort of like accordion in, and it was also.
It's a gold house, but
it was.
It's
it was-
a real special house, and the plans are very, very nice. So, sorry, we have. Is that
So
the
we
end
do
of
that?
discussion?
We have no idea.
Are we ready to vote? Yes. All in favor of granting Scott Niels a 120-day license agreement to continue his pre-development on 24 Hamilton? Opposed, abstained. I am happy to vote.
All right.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay.
When does that start? Anyway?
The license agreement,
When, yeah.
now, I guess. I mean, he's already
Got
he's
it.
been
He
under.
hadn't stopped, even though the license agreement expired like a week ago, he didn't stop work. So I think he'll just continue working, we'll just, whatever we gotta do to
I mean,
get, to get,
plumbing is.
so he keep going.
Yeah.
And access to the property. property. Right. So they're not like under construction, they're just.
He's just running more people to the building.
Yeah. Do we want to do an executive session in the middle of the meeting or leave it till the end?
Can certainly move it.
I feel like it makes more sense to do it at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's remember, sir.
I'm done.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, that
Mr.
was too
Evans.
painful.
It was great. Your first in-person committee
I know.
meeting growing up. Okay, maybe an audit, or does Erica go first?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I end up just giving it to Erica, but our annual audit is done. Erica, that's been submitted now, right?
And all is completed and it is on the ABO. It's still, ABO needs to be updated and certified. But that was the final item.
Thank you.
So that will be, we'll do the ABO certification soon, but that is all completed. Anything, nothing else to add on the audit, Erica? That's no.
No, sorry, just taking off mute. We're just waiting for final numbers for 990. So that is separate from the audit, but same CPA firm.
Big thank you to Erica and for working with the CPA firm to get that done. The finance report, usually I am on Zoom, and so I just kind of share it so that we can enter into the record. I guess I can just do that here.
Or Erica, you should be able to pull it up, right?
I can do it.
Look at that. Jeez.
I know, technology.
I know, I couldn't do that. Really.
Do you want me to put it up so it's on the screen?
I got it.
Okay.
He's just showing off.
Cool, I think you're better.
Okay, so. So just our usual, entering the financial report into the record. There's not really too much to discuss this month, pretty much business as usual. Some of the key highlights here, we got about $545 from individual donations. There were $13.50 spent on closing costs for 3 of our, those are all the legacy cities properties, yeah. Hurley, German, and Rogers.
Yes.
And then just under 9,800 for construction materials, a tiny amount spent on Greenkill, and then about 9,700 spent at Franklin. I'm just going to do my usual quickly going through the pages. There's not really a whole lot else to highlight in this one, but just so we can have this into our video record. Profit and loss for July, as usual, the end number is a negative because this is a snapshot just of July, so it's drawing down from the big grants and other income that we got at the beginning of the year. Okay. Balance sheet for July, doing well. You'll see the that 500,000 there. Accounts receivable, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. That's for the cities. Funding, everything else is, as usual, pretty straightforward. There really wasn't too much out of the norm for this month, but I'll give a minute to look through. Our statement of cash flows for July, so you'll see that 192, that is essentially, Erica, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that should be our unobligated funds at the end of July. I'll take that as a yes. So that's good cash on hand after, at the end of July with, some of the obligated expenses we have later on in the year. Our budget versus actuals. So it's the same thing as, I sort of go through this every month, but
Sorry, those are the wrong financials.
are they?
Those are the wrong financials. Those are from 2021 and not 2022. So the cash balance is well over $1 million.
It's,
So in the top corner of that financial report, you can see that it says July 2021.
wait, which one? Are you talking about this one? Oh,
No,
Okay.
it's both.
so this just this one page then, Erica, was wrong. It
No,
was,
go back, it's other
I
page.
don't think so.
Yeah.
Oh, let me see.
Yeah, look at the top.
well, this
Okay.
one has, it says 21, but everything else says it's 2022.
Okay.
Okay,
That's the approved budget.
So the cash balance can be found on the balance sheet as well. So you could, if that's the case, you can skip the statement of cash flows. There you go. So your cash balance you'll see is, 1.18 for total current assets of 1.7.
okay. All right, so ignore that other page.
I was like, wait, hold on.
I'll get the updated full financial report to replace that page. And for everyone who, in case you don't already know, I do put these, there is in our shared files, our shared folders, I put these up there every month. So when I get the updated one, I will put it in there if there are any questions. But it looks like it's only this one page that's wrong. For whatever reason. So we'll fix that.
I feel stupid, but is it correct to say that when we are considering our properties as assets, we're basically just using acquisition, whatever we bought it for, rather than
Are you talking about on this page, the fixed assets?
Fixed assets, yeah.
So it gets a little bit more complicated with the fixed assets, because what happens is once we sell a property, then the cost associated with it. So like if you're looking at this this list, this is the cost that we for anything that we physically own that we're sitting on, that we paid for the back taxes, whatever agreement it was for the closing cost. But when it comes to a property that we have sold on the balance sheet, there's like a lot of journal entries that kind of make it all over the place. So is there one thing in particular that you wanted to point out that I could go over? Because like these properties right here for fixed assets, these are the properties that we are currently, that we paid at closing. But there's another part of here, like, sorry, if you scroll down, Nate.
This one?
Oh, no, sorry, that's just our internal record. Sorry. It's the journal entries that get a little crazy once you sell the property. That actually comes up on the detail for the P&L, sorry, I'm confusing them.
No, it's okay.
So like Greenkill is listed at 102,486. Like where does that number come from?
Let me pull up the Methodology QuickBooks, sorry. Sorry, it just takes 1 second. It kicks me out between clients. Yes, sorry, that is an audit journal entry. That reclasses the acquisition of property and all the associated costs in 2021. That's $78,767. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, here, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, I thought I was going crazy for a second, but I knew there was a bunch of journal entries that impacted our balance sheet. Sorry. I think I have to be given access to share.
You requested it. I think anyone who logs in should have access, but maybe I'm not the Zoom expert I thought I was.
Okay.
There you go.
You see this screen, me moving my mouse?
Yep.
So this is the journal entry. And I could just pull up the detail here for you. This is part of the adjusting journal entries that are done at the end of audit. So to reclass the total balance of acquisition to the proper building. And then this journal entry is,
Sorry, so the
so
70.
it's reclassing all of the expenses associated with the acquisition of the property to for the fixed asset, right? So it's not just the value of the property, it's the expenses and equity that go into it.
Okay, so in short, the 78,000 is what was actually paid to acquire it. No.
It was 23.
So no, there's the purchase of the property and all of the expenses associated with it, with the building, total the acquisition. So it's not just the acquisition cost.
Right, so the 78 is the acquisition cost plus
All
all
of
the
these
other costs that went into acquisition, including legal fees, inspections, whatever else.
all of the expenses through the 2021 year for the construction costs here, the repairs, the professional legal services, and consulting.
Okay, and so then what's the other, what was it, 20,000?
So
That gets us to,
23,000 is what we.
oh, okay.
And it's plus, but this, how did we get to $78,000?
It's all of the associated expenses. So that's the requisition expense, all the expenses that happen with the requisition through 2021.
I understand, so we started construction.
Yeah, so you have legal and professional consulting. There's a legal fees here, there's architect, repairs and maintenance, due diligence, which is the environmental, the closing costs associated with the expense, property costs for development. There's testing and inspection, environmental and surveys, additional materials. These are the
We bought a bunch of stuff before the contractor showed up.
yeah, so this is the construction materials are owner supplied materials. And then all of these other expenses, anything that you see where it's related to project expense and it's the 7,000 and lower, these are all part of the requisition. And then you have the contingency here, and that's where it ends.
Is the windows. That's
Yeah.
sure. And then basically it's like the first requisition from Maida is captured in this, I think.
So the total 102,000 is not just the acquisition and associated acquisition costs, it's also construction costs?
It's construction costs.
It's all expenses related to the property because the property is your asset.
Which
So
one? Right. Okay.
So on our current, like on the report we were looking at, is everything just through the end of next year?
Sorry, can you say it again?
I'm sorry, so the report we were looking at before that showed the 102 is like everything on that report
But
just
where did
through
the
the end of
requisition
21?
No, so typically, I mean, I'm gonna stop my share before I open up something that I would do. Hold on. So typically you would do the entries at the end of the year. Right, so if we had another property, for example, like Down Street, we would identify any other related expenses at the end of the year and do the adjusting journal entries for the fixed asset.
So
Part
that's
of
just specific to or
specific to the property. So the problem with doing it in real time is because these are grant-based, we're grant-based, non-for-profit, right? So if I put the expense on the balance sheet, then I don't see the true expense when I'm reporting back to the funding source. There's no way to extract that information, so it happens at the end of the year with adjusting journal entries.
That's the end of the year.
right.
Yeah, so that's, so those amounts are acquisition costs that we actually, like that cash and that we paid in back taxes, whatever, plus any other associated costs, plus construction costs, only through the end of 2021.
Yeah, because the balance sheet is a roll forward. So the balance, unlike a P&L where you choose, like if we're looking at a profit and loss statement, also known as an income statement, we would be looking at and we say we're just going to look at July, you're only going to see transactions that occurred in July. However, balance sheet is a cumulative record through the end date. So balances roll forward from prior years.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on that?
So many, but I'll shut up.
Oh, go ahead and ask.
You don't need to teach me how to be an accountant in our public board meeting.
Well, maybe somebody else has another question that can be easily answered, so don't worry, you can ask.
So so for example, like 248 Main is 45,170. So like that's, I'm pretty sure the exact back tax figure, but obviously by the end of 21, we had spent, $300,000 renovating it and then we sold it.
Yeah,
So-
so what we're gonna end up doing is identifying the true cost of the fixed asset. Because there's other factors that go in than just acquiring the property. Right, so the end of the year, we'll run a P&L by class, because we identify each property and run a report for the total expenses for each property, in addition to the total expenses that go to that are allocated to a particular funding source. So we'll run a report by the property, identify all the expenses associated with it, and then do journal entries to now reclass them as or adjusting journal entries to go to the fixed asset.
So like 248 Main is the only.
Well, that one isn't one that we currently own, so it's not.
Right, but we didn't own it at the end of last year either.
That's why it's not on here.
Right,
Oh,
it's not a fixed asset.
Hurley was 45. I'm sorry. I see.
Oh yeah, sorry, I get what you're saying. So you're asking like these are zero because we sold them.
Right, okay.
So if you wanted to
I
like, provide the detail, so the 3 projects that we sold, we have journal entries showing the true cost of the fixed asset, and then the journal then it actually coming out off the balance sheet, right? And then it went onto the income statement because it's now income, right?
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm thinking
No.
48, but it's not registering with me. I apologize.
This is why I'm not on the committee.
No, but these are good questions. I appreciate it because it makes sure that everybody's, keeping an eye on it and they understand, I don't want to be the only person that knows what it is.
These are fixed assets because we currently hold them,
Correct.
which is why they're a positive on the balance sheet.
Right.
Sharing what you're thinking about, it would be interesting to know what the total cost of the 3 that we sold was.
Would it?
It's gonna be a little scary, Bob, but I can definitely run those reports
Call
for
it
you.
900 and just try to not think about it anymore.
Yeah, all right, just,
So any other questions on the balance sheet before I continue them? Anyone other than Daniel? Most of y'all.
Silence. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you
so
for your patience.
Ignore this page. because that's around, we'll update that. But here's a budget versus actuals. Again, as usual, the budget, Erica, please jump in if I'm wrong, because I usually am. The budgeted amount is budgeted through the end of July, so certain actuals may be higher than what they might appear to be. For example, the grant income, because we get that upfront grant at the beginning of the year, whereas the budget is just a snapshot from January to July. Did I get that right, Erica?
Yeah, so when we establish a budget, we use a straight line method or a streamline where we take the total amount and we divide it by 12. And based on timing of the receivable, it will sometimes seem like it's overinflated or we're under budget. That is a common thing with upfront like grant awards versus reimbursable grants.
Okay, so I'll keep going. Any questions so far? Okay. And that's it. All right, so I will, when we get that one page that was wrong, I will update this in the, in our shared board files so that you all have access to it, but other than that, everything else was correct, so it's now in the video record. Else? Report, I think that was it for the treasurer's report. So motion to vote on accepting the monthly treasurer's report.
I'll second it.
All in favor of any discussion? Barring no discussion, and all in favor of accepting the monthly treasurer's report?
All right.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Erica. Oh gosh, now we have it.
Okay. Discussion vote on, am I still doing that? KCLB funds transfer to legacy cities. I think I should give it to you.
I think Erica can explain it better than I can if you're willing to do that, Erica. But this is just relates to the getting ready for the closing for legacy cities.
Wait, I can explain
Well,
it.
you explained it to me, but maybe I can try to explain it back.
Oh, wait, are you talking about the resolution?
We're talking about the transfer of funds from the KCLB to the LLC.
Okay, sorry, I missed that part because I was like, what are you doing to me? Yeah, the request for transfer of funds is to ensure that the LLC is funded in anticipation of requisitions that will come from MEDA as well as any other associated cost. Because KCLB, this is kind of complicated, right? Because KCLB, the non-for-profit, is a partner of the LLC along with MEDA. The LLC takes on the liability, the financial liability of paying off the requisitions. So this will also take that additional $500,000 that kind of has been carried over from the beginning of the year and the KCLB non-for-profit financials and then transfer those funds to the LLC. I'm requesting to do that now just to be prepared so we make sure that the funds are there. However, this would potentially take place once we receive the actual money from our grantor Novo. So I would prefer to kind of be ahead of ourselves and make sure that the funds are in the bank account. And then when the funds are deposited into KCLB, the non-for-profit, they stay there. So we're now replenished. Does that make sense? I feel like there's a lot of like acronyms and LLCs and.
I was going to say, Eric, I'm really glad that you raised this idea because it allows us to be even more flexible in this beginning stage where we're working with our contractor now to possibly make window orders, which have long lead times, to start asbestos abatement work, which has long lead times and they can't do anything until that's done. So that if the contractor were to incur those expenses now, we wouldn't be able to pay them until we got the money from the Novo Foundation, which is still probably a few weeks out. The commitment letter has now been executed as of today. So it's really, people are on vacation at Novo, they're not coming back for 2 weeks. This is just a safeguard to keep the project on schedule
So,
that Erica recommended.
so we're
thank you.
we're first instance funding the beginning of the legacy cities activity.
Yep.
And will be paid back by our grantor.
Yep.
Later.
Soon.
And we can afford the first instance funding, right?
Yeah, so our cash balance right now is, our cash balance is 1.18. Because we are front loaded for the projects that we're actively working on that have not incurred the expense specifically not 248. What's the other project we're working on? I'm sorry. Not 149, that one's done. The next home, I apologize for not having. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. Sorry. I don't live in these addresses as much as you guys do. So we have the funds to cover it. And additionally, we also have that receivable on our financials. So it's technically a wash. I just think it's better to have it in the bank account. Like Mike said, that there are expenses that are coming up right now that we'll end up delaying if we don't make these payments. Part of our discussion that we had another legacy cities discussion today, and I reminded everyone that even though there is a partnership with the other third party, Meta, we are fiscally responsible. We bear the liability that comes along with being the reimbursable, having a reimbursable grant with the legacy cities. So anytime Meta submits an invoice, we have to be able to have the funds available to then pay them so that they can move forward with the project. If there's any sort of issue where we cannot pay them within a reasonable time, we could potentially hold up the process. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so Erica, just a couple of questions. So first, just to make sure I think we're all understanding, this essentially works the same way as like, we're giving the LLC a retainer that they then draw down from to pay Meta for legacy cities construction costs.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we can call it a retainer because if we waited the additional few weeks for the contract to be completed with Novo would be funding the LLC because, no, sorry, they would be funding the non-for-profit because that's who they have a contract with. Then the non-for-profit would be transferring the funds to the LLC to complete the work, to then pay down the requisition from Meta.
Right, so we're paying them 500,000 now with the expectation that Novo will be.
No. So we're not paying Meta 500,000. We're funding the LLC 500,000 by way of the contractual agreement through the non-for-profit.
Yes,
so each time Meta submits a requisition invoice for completion of part of the monthly completion of the task, similar to what we're doing now, we will pay them through with the $500,000 reimbursable grant for the LLC.
Okay, and the drawdown of those funds by the LLC is subject to the same sort of, I know the answer is yes, but subject to the same sort of financial oversight that any payments that come from the nonprofit would be subject to?
Yes, so moving forward, once these funds are transferred over, you'll get 2 financial reports. You'll have one for the KCLB non-for-profit, and then you'll have another financial report for the KCLB Meta LLC. It is similarly, we've already created that QuickBooks profile, so it has the same chart of accounts. The bank account has been established with 0 funds in it, but the $500,000 transfer will be the first transaction. Same thing, bank fees coming in, bank reconciliations and financial reports. We'll also be establishing a bill.com account for the KCLB META. So all transactions, any payments, specific, ideally, it's just a META really. All those will come from a separate entity, bill.com platform.
Okay.
Similar approvals.
Yes, I just wanted to make that clear for the record that this is
Oh, no,
not.
that's fine.
Make a motion,
Right.
make a motion to authorize the land bank to,
Specifying the amount of.
$500,000.
yeah, to transfer funds to the Legacy Cities LLC in the amount of $500,000.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of transferring $500,000 into the new LLC? Motion passed. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. I will need a formal letter confirming the board minutes to share with the bank. And then what will happen was I will make sure to copy Nate and Daniel on my communication with the bank requesting the transfer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Erica.
We're on.
Okay, next item is, I'm actually gonna kick over, also defer to Mike and Erica to present the draft 2023 budget.
Erica, do you want to drive on that?
I can, I just have to find my screen. Sorry, my screen's open.
While you're pulling it up, I think it's maybe worth noting maybe like the deeper dive that we did this year into articulating the budget itself. So it's broken up into 3 components, which are organizational, kind of in my operating, what I would call an operating budget. Incorrectly, I've learned, but that's how I think of it in my head. A project level budget, which would contemplate the second Legacy Cities, which could include Gill Street, or who knows what that's going to look like, but we wanted to budget for that on a project level, and then rolling them up into one combined budget, which is what I believe we'll be voting on, is the combined sum of those 2.
Yeah, you'd be voting on the organizational budget, which, as Mike said, is a combination of operational expenses and project-based expenses.
Sorry.
It's in the board package. I believe it starts on page 20.
It's really small and hard to read.
Yeah, it's.
I think- Erica, do you want me to pull it up on my screen again?
If you don't mind, because I have way too much open on mine.
Yeah, that's fine. Hold on, I just gotta go back to the-
I can drive, Nate, if it's easier, if she and I are going to be talking about it.
Yeah, if you
Is that
have
easier?
it, yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably easier.
Of course. And this having a lot of screens open is a weird new thing, because I'm used to having so many screens. Hey, Erica, I'm ready when you are.
Now I have to find the shared screen. I am ready. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry, just making sure. It's the beginning.
Yeah. So as Mike stated, this year we did a different process. We make sure to go line by line, looking at historical data as well as board approved activities and or expenses that they were looking to move forward with, and we made sure to take that into consideration. The budget draft again is a combination of operational expenses and project expenses that were identified by project-based expenses that were identified by acquisitions and dispositions committee. So right now, when we're looking at the fiscal year 23, we identified the amount of revenue that the organization would need to be able to complete to cover all expenses, essentially, and we also identified, and I'm sorry guys, this was me, of course, you know, it was me, fundraising budget $109,000 as our new fiscal 23 goal. Then we also identified the legacy cities developer fee for a total cumulative income of $4.2 million. As you scroll down, we identify the thing that separates most of the expenses here are our operation expenses, are our normal expenses that you would have, right? So it's typically the top tier of your P&L when you're looking at them, such as office expense, operating expense, insurance, legal and professional fees. These were all taken consideration by looking at historical data from prior years, in addition to identifying any additional expenses that we may have considered for maybe one-offs this year. So something like software, there was consideration for a fundraising software, as well as the fact that we were going to now have to account for another QuickBooks, another Bill.com. Our legal expense was taking consideration of, you know, getting additional quotes for what we anticipate future expense be. Same thing was taken in consideration for insurance. We also anticipated that we would be going out for RFP for audit, and that may have an additional cost. In addition to the fact that we will be doing an audit for not only the non-for-profit, but the LLC as well. And the LLC is a for-profit partnership, quote unquote, for tax purposes, but we are a for-profit. If you scroll down, again, a lot of these are still in line with previous year's expenses, but as you get down to due diligence and property costs, these were expenses that were meticulously the best we can, meticulously calculated based on assumptions of project related expenses for the fiscal year 2023. It's kind of hard, you can't really see the notes up on the side. So if you to go into a little bit of detail, you know, we made sure to put notes on how we got to each calculation, especially for the major expenses. There's another component of that within the Excel. We tried to make sure as much as possible that if it was a cumulative of other factors, we put the formula and/or hard costs as the sum of X dollars to make sure that everyone had a point of reference of how we got to that number. If you scroll down a little bit further, you'll see that we made a point to make sure to net zero, so that the total cumulative expenses match what our desired income is. Please keep in mind that when we establish a budget, the budget is again, organizational budget, which means that if we have the opportunity to receive the funds, this is how much we would need. Also, a non-for-profit doesn't always need to set net zero. The ideal is that we have a surplus at the end of the year. We worked with the acquisitions and dispositions committee to make sure that we identified the projects that they would like to complete. However, we did also identify, in the event that we did not receive the funds, the projects that would be ideal to move forward if we had, I guess I'm trying to find the right words, but a limitation in the revenue that was awarded to us. So we felt pretty good based on all of the committee communications that this was a strong budget to move forward with. any questions.
In general about the budget?
Sorry,
Questions generally about the budget?
anything, yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen that. So for architecture services, it's showing a 511% increase, but then it says next to it, no change.
So I think the problem with that has to do with Excel. When they were merged, some of the comments from the two different budgets were layered on top of each other.
Okay.
So what it should be showing, and we can show on the organizational budget, is that there's no change from the prior year of $50,000 for architecture. And on the project level for legacy cities, there's another total for architecture. And those two are summed together on what we're looking at right now. So it reads confusingly, but we can explain it, and certainly format it differently.
Go to the line, I can't see that on the screen.
We were anticipating spending $213,000.
So what that's based off of is our current historic spending for architecture per building, assuming that we do 5 buildings next year under Legacy Cities 2. That's the basis for the assumption. It can be negotiated and it will. We're very early in this, and I think Erica and I wanted to cast as wide of a net as possible and not be under budget on these things. And certainly Legacy Cities 2 is very much preliminary. So this is not for an authorization for the KCLB to spend $213,830 on architecture. Rather, on a project level, that's what we expect the expenses would be, for which we've allocated a combination of state funding, bank loan, and private foundation funding to pay.
As a percentage of construction costs, what is that? I didn't do the math on it.
8%.
Yeah, that's very reasonable, 8%.
It's a guess. It's a guess.
I mean, it's a 35, so we had budgeted last year $35,000.
I believe it was 50, but it could be.
But that's 35. I'm not.
Okay, so you're looking at last year's budget?
Well,
What's
I'm
this?
looking at the
Fiscal
2022 forecasted budget column. So it says 35K for architects.
Okay.
So because this 23 figure is based on historic spending, is it fair to assume that we're way over that?
For the 5 project, for 5 homes?
I guess.
So a good reference
Well,
point?
7. Oh, no, I guess
This,
Katie mostly
That, I believe the number was based on 7 homes, wasn't it?
I have to remember better, Eric, honestly.
I mean, we can take it earlier and just,
The good.
I'd like to know how much we
Usually, the good rule of thumb for Legacy Cities 1 is that the architecture fee is about $65,000 total,
Right,
about $70,000.
so how are we getting to almost
It was
214?
a budgeting exercise, but using historical information, not knowing anything about what the project would look like. They're overinflated prices, but
Okay,
they're not money that the KCLB is currently obligated to spend. I think that's right, Erica. This was a budget exercise that we wanted to conduct and not a project funding exercise, which would bring it.
No, I wouldn't say that my goal was to have anything overinflated. The goal was to make sure that we've taken in consideration a true cost of what something would look like, right? The hardest part about a budget is typically most people want to say that they're going to be really conservative. And then when the budget is blown out the following year, it prompts questions. Well, why was this number X dollars and you went over, so say it was 50,000 and you went over 100,000, right? There are certain things that aren't taken consideration. So I requested that true expenses related to anything related to acquisition and disposition and the project related expenses be looked at as part of like, what did we spend the previous year? And if we looked at another project similar to that, or maybe the house that has is a little bit more robust, what's that cost associated with it?
So this is the total here, the 163,830. And as Erica said, we talked at ADC around the different options for 7 properties,
Right, so,
some of which
so,
require architecture, some of which don't. So Gill does not, for example.
so we've said,
Oh,
basically, we're at 13-ish thousand per house, right? 63,000 and 5 homes.
no, that's the total for 2 homes. You said, sorry, this is not articulated well enough to make it easily readable, but we can do better in sending around an updated version. So the top of the column is a count number. So for 2 homes, the assumption is 2 duplexes, and those are duplexes. So 2 duplexes, the architecture fee is 63,830. For 4 single-family homes, it's 25,000 per, which was somewhat of a historical average. 25,000 per 100,000.
Gotcha.
So
But
that's,
if we've, sorry,
no,
so what if we pay for 5 houses with LVM?
LVM under $70,000,
Right,
but,
so historically,
well, we haven't paid them yet. We haven't gotten to the end of the project, we don't know.
sure, so let's round up to 7. So we're at like $15,000 per house.
They might-
currently.
But that is an outlier historically where we've been for architecture.
How we only had 2 other houses designed by architects.
And I think they were about 25 to 30 each. So this is, the LMV could be our architecture firm. You know, they're really,
No, I mean,
Checking all the
they
boxes.
moved efficiently. I'm just, sorry, I'm just,
no, it's all good.
I'm
So
only confused because even if we went to say 25 per home, we're still 100,000 short of the 213 budget.
Okay, so that's a good catch. So that's the $50,000 that I.
So there's $50,000 in KCLB operating expense, and then there's the 163,000 that was identified on the project-based expense is for legacy cities. We have to remember and keep in mind, and I will keep stressing this, that those are 2 separate entities, right? So we have legacy cities, which is the LLC, and then we have the KCLB non-for-profit. So the $50,000 was an assumption that if KCLB non-for-profit decided to move forward with the 2 potential project properties that were suggested by acquisitions and dispositions, they would potentially have an expense of $50,000 for those 2 properties.
Okay,
So that's $50,000 with KCLB, 163,000 architectural services with legacy cities for a cumulative of 213.
okay. Okay, it's gonna take me a minute today. I have a couple other questions that are smaller.
Sure.
So like, is the lawn mowing and snow removal has decreased from last year? What was the thinking?
So we hope we own fewer properties, I think is the thinking around. We're currently taking care of, I wish Owen were here, 8 properties, something like that. We just got an invoice today. So it's a fair amount per month
Right.
for that. And the thinking is that will be the 4 of the properties that we own will be turning into legacy cities projects. So the organization budget doesn't pay for any of those long-term snow removal.
Okay.
We're hoping to sell through RFP other properties this year, so that gets them on. Yeah, it's
Greenfield.
Greenfield, yeah, totally, Greenfield. Hopefully.
Is stabilization, those numbers like move to 0, but is that captured in emergency repairs?
It is.
Okay, and then for the 25, I think under advertising and external communications is part of the assumption there of redesign.
It is.
Okay. Cool. I think that completes my Sorry, everyone.
I have questions too, but I'll do others questions first.
No, I just have to say I have to go,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately. But I'll be in touch, I'll be.
The, my questions are on the donations item at the top.
Mhm.
So we're obviously significantly increasing what we are budgeting for donations. And my first question is, at the lower amounts that we budgeted for 22, how close are we to even hitting those goals?
Not really, but I haven't seen a crazy amount of effort going into the first half of the year. It's been a lot of discussion of getting those dollars, but the efforts in executing that has not brought us to the number that we need to.
And I don't disagree with that, but I'm just wondering if. in
With
the-
that said,
why-
there's a, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, for the same reason why we're over budgeting on certain expenses, I think it's probably better to under budget on what we think we're gonna get from donations. And if we're not even close to hitting the lower amount that we're getting, that we budget for 22, does it make sense to so drastically increase it for 23?
Yeah, and that is, part of that budgeting process is if there's some reason that we're not able to meet those goals, obviously we can have a deficit, right? So if we're identifying that we're unable to either reach a donation goal or funding goal, that means that we have to go back to the project like the projects itself, and identify where we're going to reduce the expense. So I do understand what you're saying, but we also want to make sure that without that $109,000, right, that we would then have a deficit.
Well,
But
but that's exactly
It
my
also
point.
reminds
is
the organization how important fundraising is. So I was going to say the other side of things is disappointing as the momentum of fundraising is. We met that goal last year in the last month. So it's just a reminder to the board that we do need to start making those goals in order to complete, to close the gap. Especially if we don't get those fundraising goals, let alone if we don't receive that number from other funding sources, major funding sources, we're going to have a deficit either way.
Eric, I'm raising my hand. I don't know if you can.
Sorry,
No,
I
it's
can't.
okay. Okay, I was just gonna note that we put in place really at the end of last year, kind of at the last minute, or the beginning of this year, I think, a $50,000 individual donation goal, right? That's the
Not
goal.
individual, $50,000.
That's our current goal for individual donations. In this budget, we're having that, so that's 25,000.
Not individual donations, just donations. That's
Okay, so-
cumulative of corporate foundation and
Cool.
individual.
So that's even easier because we've currently asked for $75,000 in corporate donations. We have a Hannaford's Foundation grant and we had a County of Ulster Foundation grant.
Those are not donations.
Okay, you're right. You gotta always remind me what that.
So, individual awards that come up, something similar to what,
The corporate donation from Hannaford is not a corporate donation?
No, it's a grant.
It's a
no,
grant.
so
Okay.
the application to Hannaford that Aaron was completing is a grant, and that will go against grant revenue. Depending on how they award the grant, it can be considered like unrestricted funds that can be used with whatever purpose for the mission. However, donations are solely those that come with the intent to donate and not with a contingency.
That makes sense. I think I consider that myself as being within the donations category, even though it would be a grant.
They're always a benefit when you receive them, when you didn't consider them throughout the year's budgeting. That's wonderful. They offset other expenses. However, they're not donations.
My point being, does it make sense to have a higher budget with the expectation of donations, knowing that there is a higher possibility that it leads to a deficit, rather than having a lower number, and if we get more money in donations, then that's gravy?
Yeah, I agree with you. Another element which we have to think about, and this ties into our board problem, you know, one of the things I learned in that class about board membership, about board recruitment, is that having a donation requirement makes it more difficult to diversify your board.
We don't have a great requirement right now.
We don't, but that was one of the
Right.
other things I was gonna mention in this budget, is that personally, I'm opposed to having that board requirement, I think because of what you mentioned, I think it is a barrier to entry, and I think it's
And it's not significant.
a barrier to entry
It's
for
very
people,
significant for your
board
organization.
members, and it's not something that was like, it's not something that we as current board members signed up for when we.
But the current board members signed up to be fiscally responsible for the organization and to support the organization by all means of fundraising. So the board give is not requiring any specific board member to write a check. The board give is requiring the board members to play a role in active fundraising by establishing whatever dollar amount that was. So we talked about $1,000 as a board initiative, because it is very hard for any organization or any community member to get behind an organization that the board themselves are doing. So I 100% back Bob's communication, and that you do not want to create barriers for board members, but this is strictly about fundraising. So one of the platforms that was offered was making sure that the board members can create a platform on GiveGab to engage with the community to raise a minimum of $1,000 in whatever capacity. So they can write a check or they can engage with their community. But it is important, it's how can an organization ask for funds or anyone to donate if the board members aren't active in that process? But I do understand what you're saying on the other side, Nate, about the deficit. You know, like, it seems like you're overinflating the revenue, but it is also a designed as a tactic to encourage the board to reach those goals.
So if I can maybe kind of cohere some of this, I feel like what I'm hearing at least, I think that Erica, I think all of your points are well taken. My concern is that realistically, what's listed here is that individual donations are projected at 25,000 and board contributed donations are projected at 9,000, $1,000 a board member. But combined, we're talking about
$109,000.
$4,000 goal for basically small dollar donations plus 75,000 for corporate. So, and I think part of what Bob is saying, if I may, is that, you know, realistically in this moment, we're at six members. We're all kind of working our asses off, and I feel like adding on a board member fundraising, I mean, it's not a requirement per se, but at $34,000, we better have some requirements, because otherwise there's no way it'll happen. And even if we do, like, I'm concerned that it is a pretty small drop in the bucket of the overall budget. So to divert board member attention and resources toward that at this time feels kind of unrealistic to me. So I feel like Nate's point that putting it in as an assumption and then falling short is kind of a dangerous way to approach it.
Yes, but also the board can decide on whatever they think that dollar amount needs to be. However, please be aware that if there's only 2 funding sources for this organization, right? Each non-for-profit, like when not-for-profits are structured, they really need to put themselves in a position that they are not dependent on those external sources, being that they need to ramp up their really focus on fundraising and whatever that capacity is. So in the event that either one of those funding sources do not meet the dollar amount that you need, and you're not focused on any sort of fundraising capacity, you're gonna be in a similar situation. So it's not really to focus on the fact that it's $100,000. It's more to focus on the fact that it's extremely important for a non-for-profit to really create an independence and have an unrestricted stream of revenue.
Well, bear in mind, much of our revenue, I mean, many land banks, our revenue is gonna come from sale of properties.
Right, like, and I guess not to be all defeatist about it, but if we lose one of our major funding sources, $34,000 ain't gonna do anything.
Right.
I mean,
Right, you're putting.
it doesn't bail us out of.
You're putting, to be honest, you're putting a burden on already burdened board members.
The cost benefit isn't there.
Right. That's a good way to say it.
That's really disappointing.
So. It
It
seems,
costs nothing for a board member to put the Give Gab page on their Instagram, their social media, to send out an email, right? Because if everyone's working as hard as they are to say that they really support this mission, it really shouldn't be that hard to share. I think only 2 board members actually created a Give Gab profile.
And let's be clear, but I'm just saying that there's a difference between a requirement that is now in the budget versus a goal. And to put it in the budget makes it a requirement that then, like, what happens if we're sitting here next year and there is 1 or 2 board members who haven't met that requirement? Are you now going to move to remove them from the board? I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things involved here. And just generally, when it comes to donations, if we're already not meeting current goals, I'm not saying that we shouldn't aim high. I'm just saying when we're budgeting for things that is money coming in.
You shouldn't be dependent on it.
Here's a board member should still be encouraged to create Give Gab pages and donate, but it should be a line item in the budget for the reason you just said.
100%, and the line item for the board is less of an issue for me, because it's a pittance compared to this whole thing, but I'm just saying, generally, we're having a much bigger discussion about an item that's $100,000 in a multi-million-dollar budget, but I'm just saying generally that I think it doesn't make sense to set us up for having a deficit.
And you're right about the conversation, but it has other implications beyond its value, beyond its $100,000, I think.
What if we kept it, what if we kept the, donation, fundraising has not been part of this, is my doing, part has not been, particularly strong this year, but what if we kept it the same for next year as this year? We'll know also at the end of this year how we did, I guess.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying, and we can always amend it if we're doing better.
Just to try to think about the process of approving the budget, would the board consider changing things in real time right now and then voting on that as amended now? With it something to be circulated very soon? Sorry, I'm trying to find the middle of this.
That's fine with me.
I might have missed it, but is it particularly time sensitive for us to pass this budget tonight?
It is. It is the LBI funding to the state has to be made by the 13th. The Novo Foundation has to be given.
I'm fine with some live updates.
So sorry to do it like this.
No.
Requested, but
No, it's fine.
We also had opportunity to review this before. So I think just carrying last year's numbers is smart.
So remove the 9,000 and take a combination of these two, say 25,000 each. So it's at 50,000.
Yeah.
Did we get 50 last year?
Yeah,
We got
it was 50 total.
Last year's budget was 30,000, and the goal was made right at the end of the year.
So we went from 30 to 50 this year, and then the board is proposing we stick with to 50 next year. And we will do our very best to be better. But
Second.
it's a big ask.
Tonight, I'll recirculate. If whatever the board decides, I'll recirculate something that reflects what you guys are, what the board is deciding.
Were there?
I'll work with you, Erica, on it.
So
I'm
what
not
do we
trying to
decide?
speak for this whole process, but I'll
So-
work with you on it.
we're trying to get to a vote to approve an amended version of this budget based on what we're talking about right now. So I feel like my questions were answered. Were there other lines that were concerning? And I'm still like a little bit concerned about the landscaping, stone removal stuff, just because if the pipeline thing, what happens if we inherit a bunch of properties?
Right.
True. We just spend the money that we save on architecture on those. Yes, you're right. There is also the emergency repairs line, which I think is
It's 60.
60,
It's
so
not-
that was inflated from prior conversation.
I have one other question. How did we get the number for project expenses with that like 1,000% increase?
Well, you're talking about the hard cost number on the project level?
There was a 3 million number.
Yeah. the
Oh, that
3
3 million number that makes up 2/3 of the entire.
Yeah, that jumped from 258,000 to 3.14 million.
So, the assumptions for that, and I'll just pull them up so I don't misquote them. Over on the side, they're very rough. They're based on feedback from Owen, based on historical expenses. So, rough TDCS, total development cost estimates are that it's $350,000 for a single family house that's somewhat tracking with historical averages.
Does that include acquisition and pre-development? That's just.
It's just hard
This is
costs.
just hard costs.
And again, it's trying to be conservative and estimate, forward-looking expenses. And $450,000 for a duplex for hard costs.
In fairness, I think we're at bringing those costs.
I believe we will, I agree. I believe
And
we will.
Meyer was crazy expensive,
Similarly, we ran into some things that we
like
just
our
plowed through.
bid for Franklin, it's like 200.
It's great. Similarly to soft costs, which are everything not the cost or the acquisition, there's a good rule of thumb that's held historically consistent for this organization and in general, that is 25% of the hard costs. So rather than speculating on 7 buildings that we don't know what they are and what it might cost to have legal expenses on those 7 buildings, you just lump it in as 25% of hard. It's
That makes
very rough back of the envelope.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was all I wanted.
Just that.
And I'm so bad at math. So how many homes does that assume?
So that chart at the bottom shows the assumptions for the legacy cities homes. It shows, I'll just give you the summary while I'm finding it. It's 4 single-family properties. It's 2 duplexes. And we go through the specific addresses that were discussed at ADC that might go into that. Abby or Stefan, I don't want to name addresses right now, but we had assumptions around what could be our acquisition in the pipeline. I think Henry was still under contemplation at that ADC meeting. There's a lot of things that go into this that have been moving targets. The other piece is that Gill Street, for example, already has architecture paid for, so that is not included, but that's the 7th home.
Okay,
4 and 2, I'm sorry, not 7, it's 4 single family, 2 duplexes, so 6 total. Is the assumption for Legacy Cities project level part 2. Very rough, back of the envelope.
and then we, in the. I mean, I don't think it super matters, but if we're pretty decided that we're selling Henry, then we really don't have another duplex.
Correct.
So
It'll all change.
that number.
We could change this to reflect the current
I guess it's.
status. Well, we could say.
Oh, no, it's not.
We just over budget.
I'm fine with over, but I feel great about the budget. But I'm just wondering if there's a redundance with, we're expecting a certain amount of revenue from Henry, but then we're also saying we're gonna spend $450,000 on Henry.
Sure.
Costs.
we could certainly cut it out. The other assumptions for other acquisitions are still in the air too, like which properties we might be able to acquire for
And if the
their
city
pipeline.
makes us pay for it.
That too, but also what types of buildings they are. There's
Right.
single families or duplexes.
It makes sense about Henry, you're right, from that,
I mean, it's
for one of them. But it
like
makes sense to me.
$500,000 assumption in the budget that
It's an easy change in Excel.
we're not doing. But I'm also fine with leaving it in with the assumption that there's gonna be another building.
I'm not gonna do 2 duplexes next year.
No,
We
but
might
that's,
do-
I'd say that's the like close to $500,000 is for one.
Right. Right,
Cause we're saying 450 average.
but even if the city came through and we did our whole thing, and we picked up a house that could be a duplex, you know, we're not gonna do 2 next year, I don't think.
And doing it is, you know, agreeing to do it versus closing on the money, and spending the money, and getting the revenue.
Spending the getting the cost.
It's gonna take many years to do legacy cities too.
Yeah.
But I'll highlight this year, so last year we had an operating combined budget of $1.033 million. We didn't account for legacy cities 1, that's $2 million, that's gonna close this year.
Right.
So we're at about 3 million and change-ish over year. Just to try to put it in perspective, like, well, it's good to try more things, but I could certainly, if you want to take legacy, take Henry out,
Well, I mean, I don't know.
or take the assumption for 2
I
duplexes.
certainly don't have strong feelings. That's the question. I guess also wondering, maybe very left field, is there anything that could or should be in here for the potential housing opportunity fund / to be named thing?
I hope to have a final update next month for everyone. I don't think it should be
The
budgeted this year.
proposal. $100, the ask for funding it, but then million.
It was originally going to be $1 million,
Okay,
and I don't think it should be included in next year's budget.
okay. Okay. So, sorry, was there consensus on what to do about the potential hard cost budget of Henry?
What's the benefit of removing
Maybe for argument's sake, it shows that we're going from about $3 million to like 3.5, you know, as an operating organizational budget year over year when we true up. So we're growing, but we're not dramatically growing. This is really a guess. These hard costs are really a guess. Budgets are really a guess.
I would, let's just leave it in, because we just simply don't know what happened. And like, the city hasn't, I mean, we don't know if there's more for or something, like, we just don't know.
Yeah.
So I like leaving options.
Okay.
So sorry, and then what about the ones, no? Are we comfortable just with the idea that if we need to, we'll pull from emergency
We can
repairs or
pull
something
from
else?
other lines if we need to, but I think based on the actual calculations, based on properties that we own and the properties that we were seeking to acquire for legacy cities, it took into account the sale of properties and RFP. I think feel like that's pretty secure.
Okay. And other,
I have one other question. Do we have just sort of a general line item for contingency
Outside of like a hard cost contingency?
that's not necessarily applied to any particular expense, but just because things
Other,
can cost more? Like it's normal to have like a 5% cushion, you know, whatever percentage in a budget.
I would ask Erica, she would be the
for
expert
like
on that.
the entire budget.
Yeah, just like, oh, this year we found out that there was a lawsuit we had to pay for, or this year we found out that there were 10 properties that the city gave us, or, you know, just
Rainy day
unexpected,
fund.
yeah.
So,
That, those expenses should usually go into each line item. So it's not the organization as a whole, right? Or I guess it impacts the organization as a whole, but as you're looking at line item by line item, you identify historical cost and any potential expense that can kind of come up with that, as you pointed out, Nate, right? So like looking at something like, you know, even as simple as office supplies and identifying if you had $500 in the budget last year, but you're spending maybe 300, then you kind of add another 5 or 10% to that so that you're estimating any sort of additional expense. Opposed to just doing a miscellaneous expense at the bottom with that contingency amount.
She doesn't like a slush fund.
Yeah, well, but it's identified, should be identified in each line item expense.
Okay. That's fine. I'm coming from the world of film finance budgets that have a contingency line item because things go wrong, so.
It's the same approach, but the goal is to have it more honed into each line, you know, opposed to a cumulative expense, but it serves the same purpose.
Okay, no other questions from you?
Okay, so. You move.
I move to accept, or to, I don't know, what's the word in this context? Approve the draft budget for the 2023 annual calendar year with the amended changes aforementioned included in the budget circular.
And the changes are reducing the combined corporate individual donations to 50,000.
And reallocating that across those, yeah, 25.
Yeah, and removing the 9,000.
Yeah.
Second.
Any discussion?
We don't have.
All in favor of what Erin?
Are we making other changes expense related?
I don't believe so.
No.
So we're approving a deficit budget.
No, because the balancing factor will be the Novo ask to fill that gap. So the Novo number will change. It will increase directly based on the reduction in the corporate individual donations in the board ask. It's a balancing number.
I missed that part of the Novo increase in revenue.
Yeah, sorry.
So the board approved budget is with the adjustment to a reduction in donations to $50,000 and an increase to the grantor ask.
Correct.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
All in favor of approving the proposed 2023 budget with the changes? Motion passes unanimously. Are you taking minutes now?
Yes.
I mean, we have the recording. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We don't take right? Ish. Okay. Well, does the mayor know?
We can breeze through the rest of it.
Okay, let's breeze. So, does that conclude your finance and
Yes,
other
I'm
report?
done.
Well done. Thank you, Erica. Sorry.
Thanks,
that was
Erica.
Arduous. Fundraising.
I'm gonna keep it very brief. I'll say a few things. My notes here. One, there are abandoned items at 169 Hurley that were left there decades ago by our owner of the building. Nate either will or already has gone to the building.
This week we're gone.
To pick up those items. Mike checked it out, what's there. If they're really personal things, maybe we'll try to figure out how we can get in touch with the family that used to live in this house. And if it's valuable items, we will have a discussion about selling them or auctioning them to use those funds for the land bank's operations and development work moving forward. There's, as Erica said, a lot of conversation, part of things have not been moving forward. Part of this my doing just because of personal obligations have gotten in the way over the past couple of months. I hope to change that. There is a ribbon cutting event at Greenkill. William had the idea of reaching out to somebody called the Early Fighting about donating something that could be auctioned off maybe at that event and turn it into a fundraising event. I actually called them on Thursday, haven't heard back, and we'll be stopping by later this week to speak with them if I don't hear back.
I'm sorry, is the ribbon cutting scheduled?
No, I don't believe so. I think this was, yeah,
Okay.
hypothetical. Last time I spoke with them, they, at the beginning of the year, they were not interested in donating, but they did say, don't reach back out, so, we'll keep it going on. And then we talked about doing a larger community event, perhaps in the late spring next year. That could be a larger, fundraising event, and then get a lot of just Kingston residents out and informing people about what we do. What that is still TBD. The last item is that Daniel, I need to get with you about social media stuff.
We have to.
We have to do it, for the sake of, because that's.
Mike is gonna kill me. That's why we have to do it.
I can't take as good pictures as you.
You will take me to every house, I will take my own set of photos. And then, and we will be able to fundraise through social media, which has proven, successful in the past. And at the moment, that is everything I have. And I pass it along now.
How much stuff is still in the, we have?
Not a lot, basically, there's a bunch of big books that are a stamp collection. I don't know anything
I'm gonna
about
check
stamps.
and take pictures
I
and
said-
catalog just like some sampling of the best stuff.
Okay, there's also the.
And then check with like an auction house and see like, is this worth it?
Actually, I didn't know
Is the West
both
Point-
George and Jay from GMW and George Cole, so
Yeah,
I
okay.
can ask, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And then there's
Once we
also
get
like
together.
photo albums and some binders of like cards and stuff. I just,
There's a bunch of West Army stuff, West Point stuff there.
there was a fair amount of army stuff. A lot of it was just sort of like,
Personal.
like paraphernalia that was not personal, like collectible
Okay.
stuff. So
There's
I
market.
don't think I really set that aside because I bring my own bias and like stamps are worth something. I don't know what these shoes are worth. Okay, thank you, Aaron. Comms, we have lost our chair. Do you want to take it?
Ed, you go, or take, ask, or you.
I can try to go real fast, but I don't.
Could I take?
You should do it. You should do it.
Okay, thank you. I'll do the first. So the FHMP is the Fair Housing Marketing Plan. This is what we have put together to propose to submit to the state to get approval for what that will allow us to do in conjunction with Pathstone. It's included in the board package. If anyone has any comments on it, I'll note that it's a live document. It's been revised twice today. It'll continue to be a live document until it won't, probably later this week when it will be submitted to the state. And then their comments will be incorporated, go back and forth, but we need it to close, and we're closing in about a month. So if anyone has something they want to discuss about the plan, I can walk people through it. It's a confidential document, so I'd rather we not do that in this, like, pause the video, but.
Has anybody had a chance to review it?
Very briefly.
Okay.
If I have any comments.
If it changed today, could you send the most current draft and then give us a deadline for comments?
You got it. Cool. You're welcome. Next item, Eric and I have a brief update on the publications page that's been discussed at prior meetings. This includes just disclosure documents to make them more accessible to the public. My update on that is that we have requested proposals from a consultant to produce two things. One of which is that very basic publications page that I don't recommend that we keep on the website for too long in that format. There are other land banks that do that, but it's a hodgepodge of things. It's not really accessible to the public, but that'll meet the initial concerns of having those documents more readily accessible. The second part of that will be putting a search engine on our website so you can search for the documents, making it somewhat more accessible. The third part of what we requested from this consultant is to put together to work with us, because this person is a specialist in these types of things and does not have a conflict because they don't want to do this work, they don't have the time, but to put together an RFP with us for a full revamp of our website. So to be continued on that, but that's where that process sits. And I just wanted to update the board that we have a short-term solution with a long-term vision for something that goes into our budget. That was, Daniel, you had asked if that was included in there. Yes, it is. So, cool.
And we do actually have one proposal that's well under that budget, so that's good.
Cool. So external communication opportunities, Bartek and I will be working closely around this. The Legacy Cities groundbreaking is, I think, one of the biggest things this organization be able to promote, that'll come into focus, I think, based on asking elected officials, starting from the top and working down and then working around their schedule. We don't have to do it in the same way as Greenkill, which is someone moving into a home that just got a certificate of occupancy. So those two things will come into focus. Probably Greenkill, they're going to be right around the same time as each other.
Do you expect Legacy City groundbreaking to happen before November?
It can happen whenever we want it to. Why?
It should
That
happen
sounds
before
like a good.
November. If you want to get people
Noted.
to show up.
Noted.
For Franklin, and sorry, you might have just said this, is the idea,
For Franklin.
yeah, to do this similar kind of schedule where we're putting out marketing stuff well before the house is finished.
I think what we landed on based on the schedule when we last talked about it was September.
Right.
It's a lift, we can do it. I want to check in with Owen on the construction schedule and see where we're at with that before even considering doing any of this. We've just made it through Greenkill as of tonight, so.
We've gone on quite long enough, but I'm wondering if we should revisit. I mean, I don't know. Another thing that came out of that discussion about putting stuff on MLS and whatever was that they did wait till the houses were complete.
Done. The one piece, I hear you, and I think it's a very valid point that we should, the Greenkill is working out perfectly, right? In terms of timelines, coincidentally, they just happened to work out. That wasn't what we originally planned. We will probably be taking out the first two Legacy Cities homes to market sometime-ish around March of next year. So you wouldn't want to confuse, you'd want to have it done by then.
Right.
So let's say it's, we want to have someone moved in by January, February. So you start a marketing campaign like 3 or 4 months before that. We backed in with that. Good, that's correct.
So
You're
I guess if they're anticipating a completion in November, if we said they told me November.
What did they
January.
okay, I'm in my mind. I don't have any.
I think we're
You
saying
have-
January, they're saying November.
Okay.
He wanted October.
He hasn't met you with finished details.
What's that supposed to mean?
I mean, you can do what he says.
I'm not very controlling this.
No, I don't mean it like that.
Anyway, potentially, I feel like we could set like I don't know, December 1st.
Start date for marketing.
I don't know.
So it's closer to being finished type of thing, and we feel we're right.
Yeah, or ideally it is finished, but
Sure should be.
it's always struck me as very weird that people can't, walk through a finished house before they.
The thing that will come up on Legacy Cities will make it hopefully more clear why most people do it like that, because you're paying off a loan.
Right. Anyway, okay, we'll talk about it more later.
So nothing more to say on promo cards. I believe Bartek did some work on that and has a final version of an outreach card that has a QR code on it, English and Spanish. I can't speak for him, but I think that's done or close to being done. I have no other updates on tabling events. That is the end of my understanding of the council.
Thank you. Governance, I guess I'll do, we need board members. Tell everyone, I will absolutely put another thing on Instagram and push that to Facebook. I don't know if we want to, I don't know.
We should be, I think we should develop a more careful process for it.
I think we need a careful process and kind of
And a better vet.
a wish list of
Right.
what it is we're particular skills and qualities.
Right.
We need somebody who speaks fluent Spanish.
So in Spanish would be a big win for sure.
Our track record is,
And
that's-
general diversity.
Right.
I'm not sure if you've looked around the table.
Much more turnover at our board members, and I think it's because people don't understand what the deal is when they join. So we should make sure that people understand what the deal is when they join, so that they stay.
So on that, I mean, I'm just gonna throw out the idea that either new board, I mean, since there's only 6 of us, like new board member kind of review of applications and stuff could be a board activity, or we put together like a task force, or someone else helps on this committee, because right now it's me and Bartek.
Yeah, I do want to know this too. Is that too many?
Oh, I don't even want to join the committee, I just meant in terms of,
I don't think it's that arduous for us all to look over. I mean, it's a spreadsheet, it's not that.
yeah, I already read
Like,
that.
so all board members would be involved.
Right, I mean, historically, we've sort of like shortlisted at the governance committee and that sort of, but I think given what a small group we are and we're not dealing with that many applicants, so maybe let's do all of that over email, but I think we should also try to set some target dates for when we want to review and make recommendations. Steve?
So can governance just do like a first crack and like rule out the people who are ineligible and then like circulate?
I mean, ineligible is basically, do you live in Kingston or not?
Just
So,
on stuff.
At least
I've already done that.
There's a nuance around who's on the governance committee right now, or who wants to be on the governance committee. I think isn't it just Bartek?
It's me and Bartek.
You and Bartek. I'm
According
sorry,
to our
you said that.
website.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so we'll talk about committees.
I would think I would rejoin if you're so inclined. But if others want to.
I think,
also.
you in particular you're good at governance stuff. I'm not, so
We'll
I'd
get
be
you there.
thrilled.
We're working on it.
Let's get involved.
But
Governance committee. Sure.
we meet infrequently, that's the best part of being on the committee.
4 times a year.
Like a quarterly meeting. Anyway, I feel like we need to talk about committee assignments generally, so maybe that's also an email thing.
Yeah,
But like comms is literally to Bartek now, and that's not gonna work. I still think we could revisit merging fundraising and comms. I don't really understand.
Watch your inbox.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, design committee, final selections are, yes,
Put it up, I got it.
final selections are going in for legacy cities.
Do you want to show?
It's all very exciting to have.
Your name.
Yeah, I
She was
got
at the final. And now we've grown up.
So we've ignored the one on the left.
Ignore the one on the left, just the one on the right, okay.
So here's what Katie Dwyer Designs came up with. They presented a few different options. Nate and I both liked this one the best.
Hi Bartek, by the way. Just want-
Hey, Bartek.
He's on. Yeah.
Oh, hi Bart. He can't stay away. So yeah, I don't.
Here's how to look on website and social. They did a great job.
I think it's nice.
Yeah, anyway.
But yeah,
Genial? That's an interesting thing.
we wanted it to be bright and pretty and simple. It looks really good on like a tote bag, mug, a shirt.
I think
I really think this is gonna be important for fundraising.
Yeah. Good job.
It has a fresh color scheme that I think is.
nothing less complicated than the three houses and the circle
And the light grass, so.
there it is, yeah.
And
As
that was
Katie Dwyer explained it much better than we ever could.
Totally.
There was the house incorporated, there's like a stained glass type element in the back to talk about the historic quality of the work we're doing. And it sort of represents like a flower blossoming, like we're regrowing these homes in the community. I think I'm sort of
No, that's
not presenting
that's
it nearly
actually-
as well as she did to us, but she did an excellent job. So,
Yeah, so we very much hope you like it because we very much didn't pay for a bunch of revisions on this. And I think it's really lovely.
think it's great.
It also gives us like having the palette be all of, like, it's a bunch of colors, so it gives us a lot of stuff to work with graphically, and they've mocked up a few things of like simplifying the palette and the logo itself for different, assets, like business cards or whatever, so.
Nice.
Yeah, Katie Dwyer Design, really, really happy to have worked with them. It is, I believe, an entirely women-owned and employee.
WBE.
Yes, I believe they're,
Good, we
it's
like that.
entirely women in that office.
Plus, like,
Except
super
for
cute.
I don't know if we like that.
Except the super cute dog.
Yeah.
She's a very cute dog. Very cute. So that's that. We don't have any members of the public, so let's skip that. New business, we did have
Wait,
that.
I have to boogie, but I just wanted to make a point out that one of the community members wrote into the chat asking if there was a requirement to state their last name. And because I didn't want to interrupt the meeting, I privately messaged them and just stated that you're only required to provide a full name and residency if you're requesting to make a public comment. And I explained this is for the purpose of the board minutes. If you are attending a meeting for the sole purpose of being informed community member, you are not required, and I apologize for the error, and I said that I would make sure to address the board.
I don't know, Erica, if that's what the board has decided they want to do though, for members of the public at the meeting.
Okay, it's not typically a requirement and no one replied back to that person, so I just wanted to make a point that I didn't want to like interrupt the chat as everything was flowing. So I didn't want to leave the meeting without just pointing out that I had communicated that.
Thank you for doing that.
And for if it needs to be addressed otherwise, you know what I mean, then obviously this was the platform. So, but I want to make sure to say that. But I do have to put my kid to bed. I'm sorry.
Good night, Dexter.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a executive session discussion, which I think will be quite quick.
Just vote to go.
Yes, so I am moving to go into executive session.
Why don't I just vote to get better? Can we just have a good session after we adjourn? No?
Because there's a vote.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Look at me knowing the rule. All in favor of moving to executive session? All right, all members of the public, great. Okay, I would like to move to authorize our executive director, Mike Hilliard, to enter into contract negotiations on additional property acquisitions.
On a specific additional property acquisition,
On a specific,
right? You don't want to just let them go.
on an additional property acquisition.
Second.
All in favor? Bartek, how do you vote for the record?
I think technically I'm not allowed to vote since I'm remote.
Oh, okay, motion passes unanimously.
You can vote, yeah.
You could vote. Because you
Well,
can vote.
I vote for it then, for the record.
Okay, then we have motion passes unanimously. Mike, best of luck with that endeavor. We are in support and excited. And now, does anyone have any new business?
Motion to adjourn.
Great. All in favor of adjournment? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.